The city was alive with noise. Machines rolled past on the streets. Humans hurried along the sidewalks. Neon lights blinked over crowded shops. Yet among all this motion, one figure stood very still. She was tall, thin and different, her skin pale with a faint silver glow, her eyes large and too bright for human comfort. She stood beneath an old wooden board that read in faded letters, "Help wanted." She had been there since morning. She had not moved from that place. Some humans noticed her but quickly looked away. Some whispered in fear, others laughed nervously. No one dared to go near. She looked too strange, too quiet, too alien. Her hands folded in front of her head bowed as if in prayer, her breathing slow and heavy as if each breath was a struggle. Children pointed from a safe distance, asking their parents why a monster was standing under the sign. The parents quickly pulled them away, saying not to look, not to talk. Some shopkeepers shut their doors, afraid customers would leave if an alien stood outside. Still she did not move, her gaze fixed on the ground, her body trembling but her feet refusing to leave. Hours passed. The sun climbed high, shadows shifted, then evening lights flickered on. Still she waited, her stomach empty, her throat dry, but her will unbroken. Every passerby expected her to collapse, but she kept standing as if tied to that place by invisible chains. Why did she stay there? Under that strange wooden board, why that message? "Help wanted." The humans thought it was some shopkeeper's old sign, but for her the meaning was deeper. She needed help, she wanted work, she wanted life, but she had no words strong enough to explain. From a distance, a young man noticed her. He was not rich, not powerful, just a simple worker returning home after a long day. Yet his eyes caught the still figure under the sign. Unlike others, he did not look away. Something inside him whispered that this was not danger but sorrow. He slowed his steps, his heart uneasy. He watched her closely. Her body swayed with weakness, her lips cracked as if she had not tasted water in days. Her clothes ragged. Not human clothes, but stitched from strange threads that shimmered in the streetlight. The man felt a pull. Part fear, part curiosity, part pity. He wondered what kind of courage or desperation made an alien stand all day in the middle of a human city, waiting for something that never came. The wind grew cold, she shivered, pulling her arms closer to her chest. Her eyes lifted slightly, scanning the passing humans with silent hope. Each time someone approached, her lips moved as if ready to speak, but they always turned away before she could. Disappointment layered upon disappointment, yet she kept waiting. The young man took a step closer. His breath caught in his chest. People around him muttered, warning him not to go near, saying it was madness, but he could not resist. Something about her silence called to him more than any shout for help ever could. He stood only a few feet away now, her head lifted fully. Her glowing eyes met his. For a moment he felt exposed, as if she could see his every thought, his every weakness. Yet in those eyes he did not find anger or threat. He found only loneliness, the kind so deep it ached to look at. She opened her mouth. Her voice cracked like dry leaves. "Help!" The word trembled out, fragile and broken. She paused, swallowed hard, then whispered again, "Please, work." Her human words were clumsy, but her meaning was clear. The man's heart pounded. This was no ordinary beggar, no simple traveler. This was someone lost, abandoned, forgotten, and yet still hoping. He glanced around. People shook their heads, urging him to walk away. But his feet did not move, his mind spun with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she here alone? The neon lights hummed above them. The noise of the city faded. It felt as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them. One human and one alien, standing beneath a weathered sign that carried more meaning than anyone else understood. The man finally found his voice, soft but steady. "Why are you here?" he asked. She blinked slowly, as if the question itself was heavy. Her lips trembled, but no answer came. She only repeated, "Help. Please." The silence that followed was heavier than the noise of the whole city. The man felt the weight of a choice pressing down on him. Turn away like everyone else, or step forward into something unknown, something dangerous, something that could change his life forever. And still she waited, unmoving, her eyes locked on his, as if he was the one she had been standing for all along. The young man stood frozen before the alien woman, his hands trembling slightly, his mind filled with questions. Still, his heart refused to let him walk away. The strange glow in her eyes was not a threat. It was a silent cry, one that reached deeper than words. The crowd behind him murmured. Some laughed nervously. Some whispered warnings. "Don't go near her," they said. "She's dangerous. She's not human." Others pointed, recording with small devices, hoping for drama, but the man ignored them. His attention fixed only on her. "Can you understand me?" he asked softly, his voice shaking. She tilted her head, her lips parted, and again the same broken words came out. "Help. Please. Work." Her accent was heavy, the sounds uneven, but her meaning shone through her desperation. Her body wavered as if she might collapse. The man instinctively reached out his hand. She flinched, her shoulders tightening, her alien instincts telling her to be afraid. But when she looked at him again, she saw no cruelty in his eyes, only concern. Slowly, with visible hesitation, she let her hand drop back down. The man stepped closer, ignoring the stares of the people around. "Come with me," he said quietly. The words surprising even himself. He had not planned them. They had slipped out like a natural response to her suffering. "You need food, shelter. You can't stay here." Her eyes widened, glowing softly in the dim light. She searched his face for signs of deceit, for a trap, for mockery, but found none. Only a trembling kindness she had not seen in many human faces before. She nodded slowly, the movement weak but full of relief. Gasps rose from the crowd. People pulled back as the alien woman shifted her feet to follow him. "He's taking her," someone whispered in disbelief. "That fool is taking her home," another hissed in fear. "He'll regret it," yet the man kept walking, and she, step by step, walked behind him. The night air grew colder, the streets quieter as they left the busy square. Her steps were uneven, her body swayed as if each step drained her strength. The man slowed his pace, letting her catch up. He noticed how she hugged herself tightly, her thin frame trembling with exhaustion. "You're safe," he said gently, though his own heart raced with doubt. Was he making a mistake? What if she was dangerous? What if the authorities came? What if she was hiding something terrible? Yet when he looked at her fragile state, those questions fell silent. She was not a monster, she was simply lost. They passed narrow alleys, flickering lamps casting long shadows. She glanced at every corner nervously, her ears twitching to sounds humans could not hear, her instincts sharp but her body too weak to act. Finally, they reached a small building, simple and old. His home, not grand, not rich, just a place of warmth and safety. He opened the door slowly, holding it wide for her. She paused at the threshold, her glowing eyes scanning the dark interior as if crossing into another world. Then with careful steps she entered, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The man closed the door behind them, shutting out the curious eyes of the city. The room was small, with a worn couch, a table with scattered books, and the faint smell of cooking from earlier in the evening. She looked around in wonder, as if every object carried hidden meaning. Her gaze fell on the couch and she sank onto it without waiting, her body collapsing like a tired shadow. He rushed to the kitchen, poured water into a cup and brought it to her. Her hands shook as she took it, spilling a little on the floor, but she drank greedily, every swallow sounding like life returning to her. When she finished, her lips formed a faint sound, not quite human words, but something soft and melodic, like a thank you from her own language. The man did not understand, but he smiled gently. "You're welcome," he whispered. He brought her a piece of bread and a bowl of soup. She touched the spoon as if it was a sacred tool, then carefully began to eat, each bite slow, her wide eyes never leaving his, as though afraid he would vanish before she finished. The man felt a strange warmth inside, a feeling of being trusted, even needed. After the meal, silence filled the room. Only the sound of her breathing remained. He sat across from her, his hands folded, his mind racing with doubts. What was he supposed to do now? He had brought her here, but what next? How could he protect her from the outside world? Finally, she raised her hand and touched her chest lightly, then said in broken human words, "Name, Leora." The sound was gentle, carrying weight. She was giving him the piece of herself she still held on to, her identity, her existence. The man's chest tightened. He repeated softly, "Leora." She nodded slowly, her lips curling into the faintest smile, a fragile sign of trust. That night, as the city outside whispered with suspicion and fear, inside the small home a quiet bond began, one fragile but powerful, built not on words but on kindness. One human had given an invitation, and one alien had chosen to accept. The journey between them had only just begun. The small house was quiet, the hum of the city outside fading like a distant echo. Inside, the alien woman sat carefully on the couch, her thin hands resting on her knees, her eyes scanning every corner as though she had stepped into a sacred place. The man moved about nervously, gathering his thoughts. His home was nothing grand, Just a simple shelter, cracked walls, shelves of old books, a table scarred from years of use. Yet in her eyes everything seemed new. She reached out to touch the edge of a lamp, the spine of a book, the texture of the wood beneath her fingers, each touch delicate as if she feared the objects might break. Her glowing eyes reflected the soft light. The man noticed how she studied even the smallest things, like the cup she had just used, or the spoon resting near the bowl. It was as if these everyday items were treasures to her, reminders of stability she no longer had. He brought her a blanket, worn but warm. She accepted it with slow, careful movements, pulling it over her shoulders. Her body relaxed slightly for the first time since he had seen her under the sign. She looked less like a statue and more like someone alive. "You can rest here," the man said softly. His voice still unsure, she looked at him, blinking as if trying to catch the meaning of his words, then nodded. The blanket slipping around her face, she whispered something in her alien tongue, a sound like music. He could not understand but felt the gratitude inside it. As she leaned back, the man sat across from her, silence stretching between them. He wanted to ask questions but feared pressing too soon. Instead, he let the quiet remain. The only sounds were her slow breaths and the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. After a while, she lifted her hand and touched her chest again. "Leora?" she repeated softly. Her name she wanted him to remember. He nodded. "Leora," he said back. His voice steady this time. She smiled faintly, a fragile smile that seemed to carry both sorrow and relief. She pointed at him then, her head tilting in curiosity. He hesitated before answering. "Daniel." Her lips moved slowly, trying to copy the shape. Neil." The sound was uneven but clear enough. His name spoken in her soft voice felt strange yet powerful. It felt like a bridge forming between two worlds. As the night deepened, Daniel brought a small kettle, poured hot water into a cup and handed it to her. Steam curled upward. She leaned closer, breathing it in as if the warmth itself was a gift. When she sipped, her face softened, her shoulders eased. He realized then how long she must have been without comfort, without safety. She looked around again, pointing at objects and repeating broken words. "Book, chair, wall," Daniel nodded, correcting gently when she stumbled. Soon the room echoed with small attempts, clumsy but brave, each word a step forward. Her hunger had not ended with one meal. He gave her bread and fruit. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. Unlike those who rushed meals in the city, she treated each piece as though it was life itself. Daniel found himself watching her quietly, struck by the thought that kindness was not a duty, but a choice, and tonight he had chosen it. When she finished, she looked at him with glowing eyes that no longer seemed frightening, but soft, carrying gratitude that words could not hold. She touched her chest again. "Safe," she whispered, the word rough but heavy with meaning. Daniel nodded. "Yes, safe." Outside, footsteps echoed. Voices passed, some loud, some suspicious. Rumors already spreading. Yet inside the small house there was warmth, a fragile peace that wrapped around them like the blanket on her shoulders. Daniel stood, pulling out an old mattress from the corner. He laid it on the floor, adding pillows and another blanket. "You can rest here tonight," he said. Leora tilted her head. Understanding his gesture more than his words, she nodded, rising slowly from the couch. Her body weak but her movements careful. She lowered herself onto the mattress, pulling the blanket over her, her eyes half closed. But still watching him, he smiled faintly. "You're safe here," he whispered again. She breathed out slowly, a sound like relief, and finally allowed her body to relax fully. For the first time in what felt like years, she closed her eyes without fear. Daniel stayed awake for a while, sitting near the table, staring at the quiet form now sleeping in his home. He wondered what kind of burden she carried, what kind of journey had brought her here, and what dangers might come next. The room grew silent. Only the steady rhythm of her breathing filled the space. Daniel felt an odd peace, fragile yet real. He had taken in a stranger, an alien, but somehow it no longer felt like a mistake. It felt like the beginning of something larger, something he could not yet understand. As the clock ticked past midnight, Daniel whispered her name softly. "Leora." She stirred faintly but did not wake, her face calm under the blanket. For the first time since he had seen her beneath the sign, she did not look lost, she looked safe. And with that thought, Daniel closed his eyes too, not knowing what the next day would bring. But certain of one thing, the world outside might fear her. But inside this home, warmth had returned, not just for her, but for him as well. The night passed slowly. Daniel woke early, sunlight slipping through the thin curtains. He turned his head and saw Leora still resting on the mattress, her body curled under the blanket, her breathing soft and steady. For a moment she looked peaceful, almost human. He stood quietly, moving to the kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast. The smell of warm bread filled the room. Leora stirred, blinking her glowing eyes open. She sat up slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders, her hair messy, her face tired but calmer than before. When Daniel placed the bread on the table, she hesitated, then rose carefully and joined him, her step still weak but steadier than last night. He gestured for her to sit and she obeyed, her hands trembling as she reached for the food. She ate slowly again, pausing between bites, her eyes always watching him. Daniel noticed the way she studied his every movement, like she was trying to learn not only words but also human ways. After a while she spoke in her broken voice, "Daniel, thank you." The words were uneven but carried weight. Daniel gave a small smile. "You're welcome." "Leora," he answered gently. But deep inside, questions pressed harder. Who was she really? What had happened to her? Why had she been waiting under that old sign? As the meal ended, Leora grew quiet, her eyes distant, her hands clasped tightly together. Daniel could see she was fighting with herself, trapped between silence and confession. He leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. "Leora, tell me, why are you here?" Her head lifted slowly, her glowing eyes softened. She tried to form words but failed. Finally, she closed her eyes and spoke in her own language, the sound like soft waves mixed with sorrow. Daniel did not understand, yet he felt the sadness in each tone. After a moment she tried again, this time forcing human words. "My world, gone," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Fire, war, many die." Her hand pressed against her chest as if holding the memory inside her. "Family, lost." Daniel froze, his heart tightening. He realized now why she had looked so broken, so fragile under that sign. She was not only lost, she was a survivor, a refugee, someone with nowhere else to go. She continued slowly, struggling with the words ship, escape, alone. "Here." She pointed at the floor, meaning earth, her face twisted in pain. "No welcome, no place, just fear." Her words were clumsy, but the meaning stabbed clearly into Daniel's heart. He imagined her stepping off a broken ship, wandering the city, met with fear and rejection until at last, she had found that sign, help wanted, and made it her silent plea. Her hands shook, her voice cracked. Not monster," she whispered, her glowing eyes filling with tears. "I want, work, live, safe." Daniel leaned closer, his chest tight with emotion. "I know," he said softly. "I can see that for the first time." Her tears slipped down, shimmering like silver drops. She quickly tried to wipe them away, embarrassed, but Daniel shook his head. "It's okay, Leora. You don't have to hide." The silence stretched heavy, broken only by her soft breathing. Then she whispered something Daniel almost missed. "Secret." Her voice shook with fear. "If they know, danger." Daniel frowned. "What secret?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her body stiff. Her glowing eyes darted toward the window as if afraid the walls could listen. Then she lowered her voice. "I have gift." She raised her hand slowly, her fingers trembling. The air around her palm shimmered faintly, a soft glow forming like liquid light. Daniel's eyes widened. It was not fire, not electricity, but something alive, a gentle energy humming quietly. She closed her hand quickly, hiding it back under the blanket. "Power," she whispered, fear clear in her voice. "Humans. Fear me more. If no," her head dropped, her voice breaking. "Not weapon, not hurt, only protect." Daniel sat stunned, his mind racing. This fragile woman who had barely been able to stand yesterday carried something extraordinary inside her. A secret that could change everything. No wonder she had been so afraid. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Leora, I won't tell anyone," he promised firmly. "You're safe here." Her glowing eyes met his, searching for lies. But all she found was truth. She nodded slowly, relief softening her tense shoulders. Outside, voices echoed faintly, neighbors moving, children playing. But inside the small house, something unspoken grew stronger, a bond made of trust, fragile yet powerful. Daniel knew then that his life was no longer ordinary. He was protecting not just a stranger, but someone whose secret could bring danger to them both. Still, when he looked at her trembling form, he felt no regret, only resolve. Leora whispered again, her voice barely a breath. "Thank you." Daniel, this time it was not just gratitude. It was trust. It was hope. It was the first step toward something larger than either of them could see. And as she sat wrapped in his old blanket, her secret now shared, Daniel realized one truth. He had not just taken her into his home, he had taken her into his life, and nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light filled the small house. Daniel sat by the table with his head in his hands. Leora moved quietly across the room, her glowing eyes softer now. Her body still weak but stronger than when he first saw her, yet peace was short-lived. Outside the walls, voices grew louder, rumors spreading like wildfire. Neighbors whispered in corners, their eyes sharp with suspicion. "The man is hiding something," one said. "He brought the alien into his house," another replied. Children who once played in the street now pointed at his window, their parents pulling them away. Fear painted every face. Daniel noticed it when he stepped outside to buy food. People avoided him, some muttered insults, some simply crossed the street. The weight of their judgment pressed hard on his chest. When he returned, Leora waited near the door, her eyes wide with worry. She could feel the change even without words. "You must stay hidden," Daniel said firmly, his voice low. She nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "Humans." "Fear," she whispered softly, her voice breaking. Daniel clenched his fists. "They don't understand you. They only see what they fear." That night, heavy knocks shook the door. Daniel froze, Leora's body stiffened. Her glowing eyes wide with panic, he opened the door slightly. 2 uniformed officers stood outside, their expressions cold. "We've heard reports," one said. "An alien has been seen near here. Do you know anything about this?" Daniel forced his voice calm. "No, I haven't seen anything." The officer's eyes narrowed, scanning the small house behind him. Suspicion hung in the air like smoke. Finally, they left, warning him to report if he saw anything unusual. Daniel shut the door quickly, his heart racing. Leora stood trembling near the couch, her hands gripping the blanket so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Daniel stepped closer, his voice soft. "It's okay. They're gone." But deep inside he knew it was only the beginning. The world was starting to close in. Days passed, tension grew. Neighbors whispered louder. Shops refused to serve him. His simple life now marked by suspicion. Leora stayed inside, watching from the window. Her eyes filled with guilt. "I bring trouble," she whispered one evening. Daniel shook his head firmly. "No, you bring truth, and I will not abandon you." But the pressure mounted. One night stones struck the window. Voices shouted from outside. "Send her out. She's dangerous." Daniel rushed to the door, shouting back, "Leave us alone." But the anger outside only grew. Shadows moved under the street lamps. People too afraid to face her, yet too filled with hate to leave her in peace. Inside, Leora's hands shook, a faint glow leaking through her fingers. Daniel grabbed her shoulders. "No, don't. They'll only fear you more." She closed her eyes tightly, fighting to control the energy within. "I protect," she whispered, her body trembling. Daniel's voice firm. "Not yet, Leora, not like this." The noise outside slowly faded, the attackers retreating into the night. But Daniel knew they would return. Maybe stronger next time the world was against them, fear twisting truth into lies. The next day, Daniel's employer called him in, his voice cold. "We've heard about your guest. People are talking. They don't trust you anymore." "I can't have this trouble in my workplace." Daniel clenched his jaw. "So you're firing me?" The man sighed. "I have no choice." He returned home heavy-hearted. Leora waited anxiously, her glowing eyes searching his face. "What happened?" she asked. Daniel forced a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about." But she knew, she always knew that evening. Daniel sat quietly, staring at the floor. "They won't stop, Leora," he whispered. "They want me to give you up. They want to see you as a threat." She stepped closer, placing her fragile hand on his arm. "You choose me," her voice soft but steady. Daniel looked at her, his chest tight. "Yes, I choose you." The choice was simple in his heart, but dangerous in the world outside. By protecting her, he had lost his peace, his job, his place among neighbors, yet when he looked into her glowing eyes, he knew he could not do otherwise. That night she sat near him on the couch, the silence heavy but filled with unspoken truth. Outside, the world moved against them, fear sharpening into anger, but inside the small home a fragile bond held firm. Daniel whispered into the stillness, "We'll find a way, Leora, no matter what they say, no matter what they do." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she reached out and held his hand, her touch light but steady. "Together," she whispered in that moment. Daniel realized something important. It was no longer just about kindness. It was about standing against the tide, against fear, against a world that refused to understand. And though the world was against them, they were no longer alone. The city grew restless with every passing day. Whispers of the alien spread through every corner. Some said she was a spy. Others claimed she carried disease. Few believed she was harmless, most only saw fear. Daniel felt the pressure tightening around him like an iron chain. Yet when he looked at Leora, weak but determined, he knew he could not let go. One evening, the sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. Daniel rushed to the window. A group of men stood outside with torches, their faces twisted with anger. "Bring her out," one shouted. "She doesn't belong here," another voice cried. Stones flew, striking the door. Leora trembled, the faint glow flickering from her hands. Daniel grabbed her shoulders, his voice urgent. "Stay calm, don't show them. They'll only fear more." She shook her head, her eyes wide with tears. "They kill you." Her broken words cracked with panic. Daniel tightened his grip. "Trust me, Leora. We'll face this together." The men forced the door open, wooden splinters flying. Daniel stood in front, shielding her. "Leave us alone," he shouted, his voice breaking, but the men pushed forward. Anger boiling, one swung a metal pipe, striking the table. Books and cups fell crashing. Leora cried out, her fear spilling into light. Energy burst from her hands, a soft wave that pushed the men backward. They stumbled, their eyes wide in shock. Glowing light shimmered in the air like liquid fire, the room bright and terrifying. The crowd outside gasped. Some fled in fear, others shouted louder. "She's dangerous. She'll kill us all," but the truth was different. Leora had not harmed them. She had only pushed them back, her energy protecting rather than destroying. Daniel saw the pain on her face, the way she struggled to control it. She did not want to fight. She only wanted to keep them safe. One man lunged forward again, rage twisting his face. Daniel stepped in front of Leora. The pipe swung, striking his shoulder. Pain shot through his body, but he did not move aside. "Stop," he shouted. "She is not your enemy." His voice roared with desperate courage. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Broken only by Daniel's ragged breath, the men hesitated, uncertain, their anger shaken by his stand behind him. Leora placed her glowing hand gently against his back, her light flowing around him like a shield. Her power wrapped him in warmth, protecting him. The neighbors who had gathered outside watched in stunned silence. Some saw a monster, others saw something different, an alien not attacking but protecting, a human not fleeing. But standing firm, the picture was powerful, a story unfolding before their eyes. Finally, the attackers retreated, fear stronger than hate for the moment. They stumbled into the street, shouting curses as they disappeared into the night. Daniel shut the broken door, his body aching, blood on his arm. He turned to Leora, her face pale, her glowing eyes wet with tears. "You hurt," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel shook his head, his breath heavy. "I'm fine, Leora, you saved me." Her hands trembled, her glow fading as she collapsed onto the couch. Daniel knelt beside her, holding her shaking hands. "You didn't hurt them, you only protected. That's who you are." She looked at him, her lips trembling. "But they hate," Daniel's eyes hardened. "Let them, I don't. I trust you, Leora. And I always will." His words carried weight. Steady and true, her eyes widened, then softened. Trust reflected back like a mirror. That night, Daniel cleaned the wounds on his arm. Leora watched closely, her glowing fingers brushing the bruise gently as she touched. The pain eased slightly. Warmth spread through him, her gift more than defense. It was healing. His eyes widened, but he stayed silent, knowing this secret must remain between them. They sat together in the dim light. The room broken but filled with quiet strength. The test had come. Trust had been challenged by fear and violence, but in the end it had grown stronger. Daniel had stood between her and danger, and she had used her gift to protect. Outside rumors would spread faster now. The world would call her a monster. But inside that small house, Daniel knew the truth. She was not a monster, she was a guardian. Fragile yet fierce, broken yet brave, and their bond was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable as the night deepened. Daniel whispered, "We'll face them no matter what comes. You are not alone anymore." Leora leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder, her whisper faint but steady. Together, the world outside was full of fear, but in that moment inside the broken walls of his home, they had passed the test of trust, and something stronger than fear was born. The night of the attack left the small house broken. The window cracked, the table shattered, and the door barely holding, yet inside, Daniel and Leora sat together in silence. The danger had passed, but the weight of what had happened pressed heavily on them both. Leora's glowing eyes dimmed with sorrow. "I bring trouble," she whispered. Her voice soft as falling rain. Daniel shook his head, his hand tightening around hers. "No, you bring truth. You bring life." His words were steady, though his body ached from wounds. His heart carried no regret. Morning came slowly. The city outside already buzzing with rumors. Some said the alien had attacked humans. Others claimed she had destroyed houses. Lies grew faster than truth, but a few voices spoke differently. "She didn't kill anyone," whispered an old woman in the street. She pushed them back but harmed no one. Small sparks of doubt began to challenge the fire of fear. Daniel stepped outside briefly, the cold air biting against his skin. Neighbors stared, their eyes sharp, some with anger, some with unease. But among them were curious glances, eyes that had seen her light not as a weapon, but as protection. Seeds of change planted in silence, back inside. Leora helped him bandage his wounds, her glowing fingers brushing the bruises, healing warmth spreading into his skin. Daniel winced but smiled faintly. "You're more human than they'll ever see," he whispered. She tilted her head, confused but touched. That evening, voices gathered again outside, not with weapons this time, but with questions. Daniel opened the door cautiously. A small group stood there, led by an elderly woman, her face lined with years. "We saw," she said calmly. "She did not kill, she protected." "Is this true?" Daniel nodded firmly. "Yes, she only defends. She means no harm." The woman's eyes shifted to Leora, who stood behind Daniel, glowing eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling. Daniel stepped aside, letting her be seen. Silence fell heavy as the group looked at her. Some gasped, some stepped back, but no one raised a hand. Leora swallowed hard, then whispered the only human word she had learned with true strength. "Safe." Her voice cracked but steady. "I want safe." The crowd shifted uneasily. The elderly woman nodded slowly. "Perhaps we judged too quickly." Not everyone was convinced. Many still feared her, but the barrier had cracked. The picture of a monster replaced by the image of a frightened woman wanting safety. Days passed slowly. The hostility softened. Some neighbors brought food quietly, not openly, but enough to show silent support. Children whispered her name curiously, Leora, testing the sound without fear. Daniel watched the small change with cautious hope. One morning a knock came at the door, not harsh, but steady. Daniel opened it to find the same officers from before, their eyes sharp but less hostile. "We've received reports," one said carefully. "She used her power, but—" No one was harmed. Daniel braced for arrest, but the officer continued. "We are watching, but for now, no charges, keep her under control." It was not acceptance, but it was not destruction either. It was a fragile chance. Daniel nodded silently. Closing the door with relief, inside Leora waited nervously. Daniel explained slowly. "They will not take you. Not yet." Her eyes filled with tears. "Because you trust me," she whispered. Daniel nodded, yes. And now others begin to see. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, Daniel and Leora sat together. Their hands joined, silence heavy but warm. They had faced the storm, and though fear still lingered, something stronger had taken root. Leora leaned closer, her voice soft. "Daniel, before I had no home, no family, now I have you." Her glowing eyes shimmered with hope. Daniel's chest tightened, he whispered, "And I have you." Outside, the world still doubted, still feared, but change begins with small steps. One act of kindness, one choice to protect instead of abandon, one human willing to see beyond fear, and one alien willing to trust. The broken house became a symbol, whispered about in the streets. The man who sheltered the alien, some said with anger, others with awe, but for Daniel and Leora, it was no longer about whispers. It was about survival, about trust, about building a new beginning together. As dawn rose again, golden light spilling through the cracked window, Leora stood by Daniel's side. Her glowing eyes no longer filled with only fear, but with hope. For the first time since her world had burned, she felt the possibility of a future. Daniel looked at her, his heart steady. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together," he said. She nodded, her soft voice repeating the word that had bound them since the night of the attack. Together. The world outside would still judge, still fear. But inside the small house, 2 lives had changed forever. And from that fragile bond, something greater was born. Not just survival, not just safety, but a new beginning.